The first thing I remember about Earth is fire. Not the gentle fire of a hearth, not the crackling warmth of campfires from the old archives, but a fire that ate oceans, split continents, and burned the air itself. My ancestors saw it from orbit, our homeworld dying in silence, while fleets of alien warships cut down every defense we had. No mercy, no negotiations, just annihilation. They called it the cleansing, a war so one-sided that the galaxy forgot it was ever a war at all. To them, it was extermination, a pest removal. To us, it was the start of 3,000 years of hate. I was born in the steel caverns of Titan, one of the last sanctuaries where humanity endured after Earth's fall. My father used to tell me stories of the blue skies, oceans stretching endlessly, mountains that touched the clouds. He spoke of them with reverence, like a man whispering about gods he would never meet. I never saw Earth, but I inherited its ghost. Every human did. The ghost of a murdered home, buried under alien arrogance. For 3,000 years, we were shadows. We hid in asteroid belts, in ice moons, in dead systems that no species cared to claim. We became scavengers, learning to rebuild from scraps. Other civilizations laughed when the word human came up, if they even remembered us at all. To them we were myths, extinct vermin, but we remembered. Our historians carved every atrocity into memory, every ship lost, every city burned, every child suffocated under alien gas clouds. The oath was passed from father to son, mother to daughter. Never forget, never forgive. I became a soldier not because I wanted glory, but because there was no other path. Humanity had one mission left, and every man was a blade to be sharpened for it. We trained in the dark, building fleets in silence, hiding our forges under the black veil of dead suns. We made weapons that mirrored our rage. Ugly, brutal machines designed not for occupation or diplomacy, but for slaughter. Every round of ammunition carried a prayer for vengeance. Every warship was named after a city that no longer existed. When I was 20, I was chosen to step aboard the Revenant, our flagship. A vessel 3 kilometers long, armored with metals stolen from the carcasses of alien dreadnoughts. Its core burned with a black hole engine, unstable, dangerous, but powerful enough to tear through fleets. We weren't building safe ships anymore. We were building monsters. Because monsters were all the galaxy respected. 3,000 years had passed. Alien empires rose and fell. The ones who destroyed Earth, the Direth, had grown fat and complacent. They ruled half the spiral arm, their fleet stretched thin policing lesser species. They didn't even remember the war they started. To them, Earth was dust, irrelevant in the tides of history. But to us, that dust was sacred. It was where the bones of our ancestors waited for justice. Now, we were ready. The silence ended. Humanity returned not as beggars or exiles, but as executioners. When the Revenant and the rest of the fleet tore out of warp and appeared above the Direth homeworld, I felt no fear. Only hunger. The kind of hunger that 3,000 years of waiting carves into your blood. I remember the silence on the bridge before the first strike. Thousands of us standing at our stations, the weight of history pressing on our shoulders. My commander, a scarred man who had lost both sons to raids on Titan, whispered a single word. Fire. And when we did, the stars themselves seemed to scream. The order had barely left the commander's lips when the first barrage tore free from the Revenant's cannons. A wall of fire and tungsten ripped across the void, silent but devastating. The Direth homeworld gleamed below us, a jewel of black oceans and crimson continents. Dotted with orbital platforms meant to guard against piracy or border skirmishes. They were not prepared for us. Not for humanity, not for 3,000 years of rage forged into steel. The first platform vanished under a storm of kinetic rounds. Shields flared blue for a moment, then shattered like brittle glass. Debris spun in all directions, bodies and metal alike vaporized in the heat of our hatred. I felt the vibration of the cannons in my bones. The deck trembling under the recoil of retribution. Each impact painted the black canvas of space with burning fragments. There was no beauty in it, no nobility, only violence stripped to its core. The Dareth were caught off guard. Their fleets were scattered across systems, patrolling their empire. The ships left to guard the homeworld were ceremonial. Polished hulls, gold insignias, admirals who hadn't seen a real battle in centuries. They had grown soft, arrogant. They thought the age of war had passed. Our opening volley proved them wrong. "Return fire detected," shouted the sensor officer. Red arcs lit up across the holo display, enemy rail batteries spitting fire from the orbital defense ring. They weren't worthless, those guns. One round clipped a corvette on our flank, tearing its spine in half. The explosion lit the bridge for an instant, and I felt my jaw tighten. One of ours gone, names already erased before they could be remembered. The commander didn't flinch. "Push through. They killed billions. Do not stop until they know our pain." Our fleet surged forward like wolves, tearing into the enemy with coordinated precision. Smaller frigates darted between the enemy platforms, firing torpedoes into their soft underbellies. Cruisers unleashed waves of plasma that washed over Dareth battleships, boiling their crews alive inside molten hulls. The Revenant kept its focus on the largest defense stations, hammering them with mass drivers designed to pierce planetary crusts. I watched the displays as another platform collapsed in fire, its wreckage falling into the gravity well below. The flames reflected in my eyes, and I thought of Earth. I thought of my father's stories, of oceans and skies that were stolen before I ever breathed them. I thought of the children suffocated in bunkers, of the cities burned for sport. Every death we dealt tonight was a fragment of justice. A repayment in blood and ash. The Dareth scrambled to mount a defense. Dozens of ships leapt from the planet's surface, sleek war cruisers painted with their imperial crest. Their hulls gleamed, ceremonial gold against the black void. But gold doesn't stop tungsten. Gold doesn't protect against fury. We cut through them like blades through rotten wood. They weren't cowards, not all of them. Some fought hard, desperate to protect their home. Their cruisers lashed out with plasma lances, raking across the hull of one of our destroyers, splitting it open like a tin can. Hundreds of our brothers and sisters vented into space, their screams cut short by the void. I felt my gut twist, but the hatred burned hotter than grief. For every one of ours lost, 1,000 of theirs would fall. That was the oath. "Status?" the commander growled, pacing the bridge like a predator. "Outer defenses collapsing. Enemy fleet attempting formation around planetary shield generators." "Then break them." We drove into them head-on. Missiles screamed across the void. Plasma beams carved arcs of molten death, and railguns thundered without pause. Space lit with constant flashes, as if 1,000 suns were being born and dying in moments. Enemy ships exploded in bright blossoms, torn apart by our precision strikes. Still they fought, and still they died. One Dareth cruiser rammed into a human frigate, sacrificing itself to tear us down. Both vessels became shrapnel, bodies scattering into orbit. I gritted my teeth, knuckles white on the railing, my heart pounding with every impact. This wasn't a war, it was a purge, and I was part of the blade. Then came the ground strike orders. Our fleet had broken the defense ring. The homeworld lay exposed, planetary shields flickering as our disruptors chewed at them. Beneath that shimmering veil, I saw cities stretching across the continents. Towers of obsidian and fire. Millions of Dareth lived there, millions who had danced and celebrated while Earth burned 3,000 years ago. "Orbital bombardment protocols ready," the weapons officer said. The commander's eyes narrowed. He didn't hesitate. "Burn them." The first plasma bombardment lanced through the atmosphere, punching holes in their shields, boiling the very air. The shield grid cracked, overloaded by centuries of neglect. Then came the real fire. Tungsten rods, each the size of skyscrapers, dropped from orbit with terminal velocity. We called them God hammers. The first one struck a capital city on the northern continent. The impact was blinding, brighter than a sun, carving a crater that swallowed half the metropolis. The shockwave leveled everything for hundreds of kilometers. I watched in silence. I wanted to feel satisfaction, wanted to taste the justice of it. But there was no satisfaction, only emptiness. This wasn't repair, this wasn't healing. This was revenge, raw and ugly, and still I could not stop myself from craving more. The Dareth screamed across their channels, begging for ceasefire, demanding parley. They had forgotten. They had forgotten Earth. They had forgotten the screams of our people as their fleets rained fire upon us. They had forgotten the cities they glassed, the oceans they boiled. But we remembered. We had remembered for 3 millennia. "No negotiations," the commander spat. "No survivors." Our fleet obeyed. City after city burned. Rods fell from the sky like the judgment of angry gods. Entire continents cracked, oceans boiled into steam, and the once proud Dareth Homeworld turned into the very image of what they had done to us. Their voices filled the comms, shrill, broken, pleading for mercy. But mercy had died with Earth. Through the chaos, one message came directly to our bridge. A Dareth general, face burned and bloody, shouted in his native tongue before the translators caught up. "Why? Why are you doing this? We never wronged you." The commander laughed, a sound like gravel grinding under steel. "You don't even remember. That's why you deserve extinction." The general's face twisted in confusion, then horror as we reminded him. A recording played across the comms. The final transmission from Earth 3,000 years ago, screams and fire, the desperate voices of billions dying. The general's eyes widened as history crashed down upon him. His species had erased the memory, buried their crimes under centuries of arrogance, and now the dead had returned to collect the debt. The message ended with static. The general's ship exploded seconds later. Hours passed. The surface was unrecognizable. What had once been cities were now molten scars. The atmosphere boiled, storms of ash swallowing the planet whole. Our fleet hovered above like vultures over a corpse, raining fire until nothing remained but ruins and silence. When the last city burned, the commander gave the final order. "Leave nothing alive." We launched drones and hunter-killer squads to scour the surface, exterminating survivors who crawled from the rubble. Every voice, every scream, every plea, cut short by the weight of justice. I stood at my post, silent, my hands trembling though I tried to still them. We were writing history in blood, just as they had written ours. As the smoke rose from the planet below, I finally allowed myself to close my eyes. I didn't see victory. I didn't see triumph. I saw Earth. I saw oceans that no longer existed, skies that were ash, children whose bones had long turned to dust. Nothing we did here could bring them back. Nothing could fill the hole left in our souls. But at least, for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy would remember us. The Dareth Homeworld was nothing but a smoking carcass when we left orbit. We didn't stay to gloat, didn't linger in the ruins. Our mission wasn't to bask in victory. It was to remind the galaxy that humans were not ghosts. We had returned, and we carried with us the weight of 3 millennia. As the Revenant broke orbit, I stood at the observation deck, watching the planet shrink behind us. It looked like Earth must have looked when it burned, scarred, bleeding, broken. A fitting symmetry. A cruel one, too. For the first time in my life, I felt something unexpected gnaw at me beneath the rage, not regret, not guilt. But the cold realization that vengeance was not an end. It was a beginning. We had lit the fire. Now it would spread. The news traveled faster than our ships could. Across the galactic networks, whispers began to swell into panicked screams. Reports called us ghosts, demons, revenants. Some believed we were an old empire thought extinct, returned with stolen technology. Others pieced it together. Humans. The vermin species wiped out millennia ago, the ones that had been forgotten. But not everyone had forgotten. We intercepted transmissions between alien trade guilds, militaries, and council chambers. The words Earth and cleansing resurfaced after centuries buried. Some of them spoke with fear, others with shame, most with anger. The galaxy had grown comfortable without us, reshaping itself without the nuisance of humanity. And now here we were, carrying fleets of steel monsters and weapons forged in the dark. "Commander," the communications officer reported. 30 systems are already on high alert. The Council is calling an emergency session." The commander smirked, eyes cold. "Good. Let them talk. Fear is the first weapon." 2 days after the destruction of the Dareth Homeworld, we struck again. This time it wasn't military. It wasn't a fortress or a fleet. It was a trade hub, Helios Station, the largest commercial outpost in the sector. Tens of millions lived there. Merchants, smugglers, bureaucrats, civilians from a dozen species. They thought themselves untouchable. Who would dare strike the center of commerce? Who would spill blood where profit flowed? We did. The order was simple: cripple their economy, choke their arteries, remind the galaxy that no place was safe. I remember the silence of the station when we breached its defenses. Not silence from peace, but from shock. They had seen what happened to the Dareth world on the networks, but none of them believed we would come here. Not so soon. Not so ruthlessly. Our Marines stormed through the docks, armored in exosuits that hissed and groaned with mechanical strength. I led one of the squads, rifle steady, boots pounding against steel floors. Civilians scattered like insects, screams echoing through the station. Some raised weapons, desperate or foolish enough to fight back. They died quickly. We weren't here for plunder. We weren't here for conquest. We were here for a message. "Burn the markets," the commander's voice came through the comm. "Let their wealth turn to ash." We rigged charges along the trade halls, detonated fuel depots, and vented cargo bays into space. Billions of credits worth of goods, gone in minutes. Flames swallowed the once glistening towers, smoke filling the artificial skies of the station. The panic spread faster than fire. One alien, a merchant draped in silk, threw himself at my feet, begging for mercy. His words came out garbled, desperate, his species' tongue barely translated. He offered riches, ships, slaves, anything. I stared down at him through my visor, rifle aimed at his head. For a moment, I saw his eyes. They were terrified, but not for his life, for his wealth, for what he stood to lose. I pulled the trigger anyway. When Helios Station fell, the galaxy erupted. The Council denounced us as terrorists, demanding immediate retaliation. Armadas were mobilized, fleets pulled from colonies and borders. Species that hadn't spoken to one another in centuries suddenly whispered together in fear of the same name, human. But others remembered differently. Smaller civilizations, the ones crushed under the boots of empires like the Dareth, sent us messages in secret, not of hatred, but of hope. They remembered their own worlds burned, their own people enslaved. To them, we were not monsters. We were avengers. Proof that the powerful could bleed. Proof that justice, no matter how long delayed, could still be taken. One message in particular stuck with me. A broadcast from the Tarkin, a reptilian species long subjugated by the Council. Their words burned into my skull. "Human brothers, we have not forgotten your fire. Strike them all, and we will rise beside you." The commander smiled when he heard it. "The galaxy thinks we're alone. They'll soon learn we've lit a fire they cannot put out." But not everyone on our side agreed. The deeper we pushed, the more we destroyed. The more I saw cracks in the faces of my brothers. Some of them stared too long at the fires they lit. Some muttered in the silence of their bunks, wondering if we were becoming what we hated. But no one dared say it too loud. I kept my doubts buried. There was no room for weakness. But at night, when the engines hummed and the stars slid past, I dreamed of Earth. Not of its destruction, but of what it might have been if we had survived. If we had built, instead of burned. The war didn't care for dreams. The galaxy didn't care for peace. All it understood was fear. And fear was spreading. The Council made their first move 3 weeks after Helios. A coalition fleet, 500 warships drawn from 6 species, intercepted us in the neutral Seraph system. Their message was broadcast galaxy-wide, a show for every civilization to witness. "Human vessels," the alien admiral's voice boomed, dripping with arrogance. "You are an abomination of history, a threat to peace. Surrender your fleets or be erased once more." The commander laughed, bitter and sharp. 3,000 years ago, you erased us. You failed. Now it's our turn." The battle that followed was not a clash. It was slaughter. The Revenant's black hole engine tore open their formations with gravitational shears, pulling ships into each other like toys. Our torpedoes struck with surgical brutality, splitting cruisers into pieces before they could fire. The Coalition's proud dreadnoughts crumbled under barrages of kinetic rods, their shields failing within minutes, the stars filled with wreckage, fire reflecting against the void. I fought at my station, hands trembling not from fear, but from exhilaration. Every time an enemy vessel split apart, I thought of Earth. Every time a voice screamed across the comms before cutting into static, I thought of the silence of our burned oceans. When it ended, half the Coalition fleet was gone. The survivors scattered, their formation shattered. The galaxy had watched their champions fall, and humanity had carved its place back into history. But victory carried weight. The dead on our side numbered in the thousands. Brothers and sisters I had trained with, eaten with, laughed with. They were gone, reduced to ash, drifting in the Seraph system. The price of vengeance was always blood, and we paid it in full measure. I walked the decks after the battle, stepping over scorched steel. The smell of burned flesh lingering in the air. Medics carried broken men past me, their eyes empty, their limbs gone. One of them grabbed my arm as I passed. His voice was weak, trembling. Did we win?" I looked at him, at the ruin around us, at the wreckage burning in the stars. My throat tightened. We didn't lose. It was the only answer I could give. By the time we regrouped, the galaxy was in chaos. Trade routes collapsed. Colonies rioted. Species once loyal to the Council broke away, terrified of the war we had ignited. Our name spread on every channel, every whisper. Human. Not extinct. Not forgotten. A storm that had slept too long. And yet for all the fire we lit, I couldn't shake the gnawing question, what came after the vengeance? If every world burned, if every enemy lay in ash, what then? Would we rebuild Earth? Could we? Or had we doomed ourselves to become the very executioners we once hated? The commander had no doubts. He spoke of conquest, of tearing down the Council piece by piece until the galaxy was ours. He spoke of human destiny, of 1,000 new Earths carved from the bones of others. The crew cheered, their blood still hot with rage. But I stood in silence, because deep in my bones I knew vengeance had no end. That night, as the fleet prepared for the next strike, I sat alone in my quarters. I stared at the stars outside, countless and cold. I thought of the voices begging for mercy on the Dareth world. I thought of the merchant at Helios, clutching my boots as I pulled the trigger. I thought of the Council Admiral, arrogance shattered by fear before his ship split apart. I thought of Earth. And for the first time, I wondered if we had already lost, even in victory. The silence after battle is always the loudest. We had destroyed the Coalition fleet in the Seraph system, but the echoes lingered. The decks of the Revenant smelled of scorched steel and blood, the corridors lined with wounded men. Medics worked until their hands shook, stitching together bodies that barely resembled the men I had trained beside. The air was thick with disinfectant, but it couldn't cover the copper bite of spilled blood. I walked those halls with my rifle still slung across my back, not out of need, but habit. It was impossible to uncoil the tension after a battle like that. My boots clanged against the grated floors, every sound sharp in the uneasy quiet. Men glanced at me as I passed, their eyes hollow, their faces pale. They weren't celebrating victory, they were enduring it. Victory in our war never came free. In the officer's ward, I found Harlan, my second in command during boarding strikes. He'd lost his arm at Helios Station, plasma tearing it clean off. They'd grafted a mechanical replacement, but it was clumsy, awkward. He stared at it like a foreign thing, flexing the fingers slowly. "They keep calling it a gift," he muttered as I approached. His voice was low, bitter. "I call it a shackle. Metal doesn't heal. Metal doesn't feel." "You're alive," I told him. He snorted, eyes hard. "Am I? Or am I just one more piece of scrap the galaxy welded together?" He turned to me, his gaze sharp. "Tell me, do you even know what we're fighting for anymore?" The words hit harder than I wanted them to. I clenched my jaw, searching for the fire that usually came so easily. But it wasn't there, not fully. "Justice," I said finally. "For Earth." Harlan's laugh was hollow. "Earth's dust, always has been. We're not fighting for justice anymore. We're fighting because it's all we know." I wanted to argue, wanted to strike him for speaking against the oath. But I didn't. Because part of me feared he was right. The commander called us to the War Council later that cycle. Officers filled the chamber, their faces shadowed under the cold glow of the star maps. Planets lit up in red across the holotable, targets marked with ruthless precision. "We broke the Dareth," the commander said, his voice carrying like iron. "We shattered the Coalition. The galaxy trembles. But fear is not enough. We must turn fear into obedience." The holo shifted. New targets flared, council worlds, trade nexuses, colonies stretching across half the spiral arm. It wasn't strategy. It was conquest. "Every world that stood idle during Earth's burning is guilty," the commander continued. "Every empire that profited while we died is guilty, and guilt is cleansed with fire." The room erupted in cheers, men pounding fists on the table, their eyes blazing. I watched them, listened to the thunder of their approval, but my gut twisted. There was no end in the commander's voice, no plan for peace, no thought of rebuilding, only fire, only destruction. I remembered my father's stories of Earth, not the burning, but the living, the skies, the oceans, the cities full of laughter. Was this what he would have wanted? A legacy of endless fire? When the meeting ended, I left without cheering. Rumors spread like rot in the days that followed. Whispers of dissent, of men questioning orders, not openly, never openly, but in the bunks, in the mess halls, behind closed doors. Some said we were no better than the Dureth. Others said we were worse. But the commander had no patience for whispers. The first time he made an example, it was brutal. A young lieutenant had been caught hesitating during a ground strike, refusing to execute civilians. The commander dragged him before the entire company, stripped his insignia, and shot him point blank. His body slumped onto the steel deck, blood pooling at our boots. "Mercy is weakness," the commander growled, "and weakness will kill us faster than any enemy." No one argued after that. But the whispers didn't stop. They just grew quieter, darker. The galaxy responded, just as the commander predicted. A second coalition was forming, larger than the first. Dozens of species, some ancient rivals, now united by fear of us. Their fleets gathered at choke points, their supply lines stretched taut. The Council declared humanity an existential threat, calling for extermination. I heard the words broadcast across the networks. The vermin return to finish what was long corrected. We will wipe them from existence, this time forever. The irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted to erase us, just as they had 3,000 years ago. But the difference now was simple. We had claws sharper than theirs. The commander relished it. "Let them come," he told us. "Let them gather their armies, their fleets, their arrogance. We will burn them all, and when the last ember fades, humanity will rule the ashes." The men cheered again, their voices loud enough to shake steel. But in the back of the chamber, I stayed silent. Because I didn't want ashes. I wanted Earth. And Earth was gone. Our next strike was not war. It was massacre. We descended on Arath Prime, a council colony, rich with resources, shielded by fleets. The battle was short, brutal. Their ships burned, their cities fell, their defenses shattered. When the smoke cleared, civilians poured into the streets, begging for mercy. Children clung to their mothers, elders fell to their knees. The commander gave no quarter. "Cleanse the planet," he ordered. The streets ran red. I led my squad through the city, rifle hot in my hands. Every corner revealed another pleading face, another terrified cry. My men fired without hesitation, their eyes blank, their hearts dead. I tried to keep my focus forward, tried not to see the faces. But one caught me. A boy, no older than 10, clutching a shard of glass like a weapon. His eyes were wide, defiant even through his terror. He stood in front of a woman, his mother maybe, shielding her with his tiny body. My rifle shook in my hands. The boy shouted something in his alien tongue, voice cracking, trembling but strong. The translator sputtered, then caught. "You won't take her." My finger froze on the trigger. Behind me, one of my men stepped forward, raised his weapon and shot the boy through the chest. He crumpled without a sound, the shard of glass clattering against the stone. I couldn't breathe. My chest burned. My vision blurred. I wanted to scream, to kill the man who had fired. But I didn't. I just stood there, rifle heavy in my hands, watching the woman wail as she cradled the boy's body. We moved on. The city burned, and something inside me cracked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bunk, staring at the steel ceiling, the boy's eyes haunting me. Defiant, brave, not human, but human enough. I thought of Earth's children, the ones who had screamed as fire rained down, as oceans boiled, as bunkers collapsed. I thought of the faces that had been erased, the voices silenced. Were we giving them justice, or were we making their killers proud by becoming the same? The whispers in the bunks grew louder. Men talked of rebellion, of putting a bullet in the commander before he dragged us all into damnation. Others swore loyalty, too blinded by rage to question. The fleet was fracturing, and the cracks grew wider with every planet we burned. The commander saw it too. He wasn't blind. But instead of tempering the fire, he poured fuel on it. "The weak will falter," he told us, his voice booming across the hangars. "The cowards will break, but the strong, the true sons of Earth, will carry our vengeance until the stars themselves bow before us. There is no turning back. There is no peace. There is only fire until the galaxy remembers." The men roared. But I didn't. Because I knew what he really meant. There would be no end. Not until we were ash ourselves. One cycle later. As the fleet prepared for another strike, I stood alone in the observation deck, staring at the stars. My reflection glared back from the glass. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, hands that shook no matter how tight I balled them. I thought of my father's stories. I thought of Earth. I thought of the boy on Aerith Prime, standing with glass in his hands against the storm. And for the first time, I whispered words I never thought I'd speak. Maybe Harlan was right. Maybe we weren't fighting for Earth anymore. Maybe Earth was gone, and all we were doing was burning the galaxy because we didn't know how to stop. And maybe, just maybe, our greatest enemy wasn't the Council, it was ourselves. The silence on the Revenant wasn't the silence of discipline anymore. It was the silence of division. Men didn't laugh in the mess halls. They didn't trade stories in the bunks. They kept to their corners, speaking only in whispers. Some whispered loyalty, blind, burning loyalty to the commander and his vision of fire without end. Others whispered doubt, their voices trembling but fierce, questioning if we were becoming the very monsters we had sworn to destroy. I moved between them, feeling the tension in every step. Their eyes followed me, searching, weighing, as if I were a scale that might tip one way or the other. The commander still spoke, as if nothing had changed. He barked orders, mapped targets, promised glory. But even he knew the cracks were widening. He could see it in the way men hesitated at his speeches, their cheers quieter, their fists slower to pound. And he responded the only way he knew how, with more fire. "Cowards rot," he told us after the Arath Prime massacre. "Only the strong endure. If you doubt, leave your rifle behind and walk into the void. The galaxy has no place for hesitation." No one walked into the void. But the hesitation remained. Harlan was the loudest of the doubters. I found him in the lower decks one night, surrounded by a small knot of men. They huddled in the shadows, their voices hushed, eyes darting toward the cameras as if expecting the commander himself to materialize from the steel. "We're no better than them," Harlan growled, his mechanical hand flexing, the servos whining. "We're worse. At least the Dareth had forgotten what they did. We remember. And we still slaughter without mercy." One of the younger soldiers shook his head, fear sharp in his voice. "If the commander hears you, let him," Harlan spat. "He can put a bullet in me, but it won't change the truth." He noticed me then, standing at the edge of the shadows. His eyes narrowed, but there was no fear. "You've seen it too," he said. "Don't pretend you haven't." The boy on Aerith Prime flashed in my mind, defiant even as he died. My throat tightened, but I didn't answer. Harlan stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his intensity. "You know where this leads. There's no Earth waiting at the end of this war, only ash. We can't follow him forever." I wanted to shout at him, tell him he was wrong, that vengeance was still righteous. But the words wouldn't come, because deep inside, I knew he was right. The first act of open defiance came days later. A cruiser in our fleet, the Iron Fang, disobeyed orders during a planetary strike. The commander had ordered full extermination, no survivors. But the Fang's captain, an old soldier named Vero, halted the bombardment halfway through. He broadcasted to the fleet, his voice low but firm. "This isn't vengeance. This is madness. We swore to avenge Earth, not to burn every child that looks at us with fear. If you want to finish the slaughter, you'll do it without my guns." The fleet froze. No one had ever defied the commander openly. For a moment there was silence. Long, sharp, suffocating silence. Then the commander's voice thundered across every channel. "Vero, you've betrayed the oath, betrayed Earth, betrayed us all." Vero didn't flinch. "No, I'm trying to save what's left of us." The commander ordered immediate execution. The Revenant turned its guns on the Iron Fang. The first volley ripped through her shields, tearing her hull apart. Flames blossomed across her spine. Men screamed through the comms, begging for mercy, for a ceasefire. The Fang didn't fire back. Not once. She just drifted, breaking apart piece by piece until her core went critical and she exploded in silence. The shockwave rattled our hull. The silence afterward was worse. After the Fang, no one dared speak openly, but the whispers grew bolder, angrier. Every man who doubted saw Vero as a martyr. Every man who followed the commander saw him as proof that weakness deserved death. I was caught in between. I carried out my orders. I fought, I killed, I burned. But at night, I lay awake with Harlan's words in my head, with Vero's voice echoing in my ears, with the boy's eyes burning in my memory. Justice, revenge, madness, they blurred together until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. The galaxy responded to our fracture with blood. The second coalition gathered faster than the first. Hundreds of species united, their fleets massing into an armada unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. They weren't just fighting to stop us, they were fighting to survive us. Scouts reported their numbers. Thousands of warships, dreadnoughts the size of cities, carriers bristling with fighters. The Council had called every ally, every vassal, every mercenary. They promised wealth, power, survival, anything to gather strength. We were outnumbered 10-1. But the commander didn't care. He welcomed it. "Let them come," he snarled. "We'll tear their fleets apart and feed their bones to the stars. Humanity doesn't need numbers. Humanity is the weapon." His eyes blazed when he said it. The men roared with him. But I saw fear in their faces, hidden beneath the shouting. They knew what I knew. Numbers mattered. And if the galaxy wanted us dead badly enough, numbers could be endless. The first clash came at the edge of the Orion Belt. Their armada swept into the system, banners of a dozen species burning across the stars. Their formation was disciplined, perfect, shields overlapping. Weapons synchronized. They were ready. We met them head-on. The Revenant's black hole engine screamed, tearing gravity wells into their lines. Our frigates darted like wolves, striking and vanishing, ripping through supply ships. Drones swarmed, kamikaze vessels detonating against their hulls. The battle was chaos. I sat at my station, hands steady but heart pounding. Every explosion lit the stars. Every scream over the comm felt like it tore into my chest. Our ships burned. Theirs burned. The void filled with wreckage and fire. But for every one of theirs we destroyed, 3 more pressed in. Their numbers swallowed us, their formations bending but not breaking. "We're being outflanked," someone shouted. "Reinforce the line!" "Shields failing on the left wing." The commander stood tall, unshaken. His voice cut through the chaos like steel. "Fight! Humanity bends to no one." And so we fought. Hours passed. Ships shattered. Men died. The void turned red with wreckage and blood. But the tide was against us. For the first time since our return, I felt something colder than rage. Fear, not fear of death, I had made peace with that long ago. Fear that we had pushed too far, burned too much, and the galaxy was finally ready to bury us for good. In the chaos, I caught sight of Harlan's squad on the tactical feed. They were pinned, their ship breaking apart, his voice shouting over the comms. "We can't hold! We need withdrawal! If we stay, we die for nothing!" His words weren't just desperation, they were rebellion. The commander's response was immediate, his voice thunderous. "There is no withdrawal. You die here, or you die a coward." The channel crackled with silence. Then Harlan's voice came back, cold and steady. "Maybe dying a coward is better than dying blind." The feed cut out. His ship vanished in a fireball seconds later. I don't know if it was enemy fire, or if the commander had turned his guns on him. The battle raged on, but something had changed. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. Men hesitated at their stations. Orders were questioned. Some ships broke formation, retreating into the void without permission. The fleet wasn't a blade anymore. It was splintering in our hands. And as I stared at the burning stars, I realized the truth. The galaxy might not need to kill us. We might do it ourselves. The Orion Belt burned behind us like a funeral pyre. We had survived, but survival didn't feel like victory. Our fleet limped away, hulls torn, crews gutted, engines bleeding fire into the void. The Council's armada had been bloodied, yes, but not broken. They could afford their losses. We could not. On the Revenant, the silence was worse than any wound. The corridors stank of oil, smoke, and blood. Men moved like ghosts, their faces hollow, their eyes sunken. They had seen too much fire, too much death, too many brothers torn apart and vented into space. And beneath the silence, the whispers grew louder than ever. Some whispered rage at the commander, that his fire had pushed us into a war we couldn't win. Others whispered loyalty, blind and fanatical, swearing they'd burn until nothing was left. But no one was neutral anymore. The fleet was splitting down the spine, and we all knew it. I found myself in the lower decks again, pulled there by instinct more than choice. That's where the doubters gathered, where men like Harlan had spoken before the Orion Belt claimed him. His voice lingered in my skull like a scar. Maybe dying a coward is better than dying blind. The men who remained carried his fire. They didn't shout. They didn't preach. They just looked at me with hard eyes when I stepped into the shadows, as if asking which side I stood on. "You fought beside Harlan," one of them said. His face was gaunt, his arm wrapped in bloodied bandages. "You saw what he saw." I didn't answer. Another leaned forward, his voice low. "We can't keep following the commander. He'll burn us all, and for what? Earth's gone. There's no justice left, just slaughter." My throat tightened. Their words weren't lies, but to speak them felt like betrayal, not just of the commander, but of every oath I'd ever sworn. Finally, I forced myself to speak. "If you rise against him, he'll kill you." The man with bandages smirked, bitter. "Maybe, but if we don't, he'll kill us slower." The commander must have sensed it too. He called another assembly in the hangar bay. The entire crew crammed shoulder to shoulder beneath the steel ribs of the ship. His presence was a storm, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You think we're broken?" he roared. "You think the galaxy has beaten us? No, the galaxy fears us. They gather their fleets because they know what humanity is, the fire they can't extinguish." The men shouted, some raising their rifles high, their voices raw with anger. But the cheers weren't universal anymore. Half the hangar stood in silence, their eyes cold, their jaws clenched. The commander saw it. He pointed at them, fury blazing in his eyes. "Doubt festers like rot. Weakness spreads like disease. I will not allow it." He raised his pistol and fired. A man in the silent half crumpled, blood spraying across the steel floor. The hangar erupted, some men cheering, others staring in horror. The commander holstered his pistol slowly, his voice like gravel. "Every man who doubts will meet the same end. Humanity has no place for cowards. Only fire, only vengeance." He turned and left, his boots echoing in the stunned silence. The body lay there for an hour before anyone moved it. That night, the mutiny began. It started small. A supply ship refusing to deliver munitions, its crew vanishing into the void. Then a destroyer broke formation during a patrol, its engines flaring as it disappeared into warp. Whispers said they defected to the Council, offering their knowledge in exchange for survival. The commander's response was swift and merciless. He ordered patrols doubled, loyalty tests enforced. Men were dragged from their bunks in the middle of the night, accused of treachery, executed without trial. The steel corridors echoed with gunshots. The air reeked of burned flesh from torch chambers. The fleet wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a cage. And we were the animals tearing each other apart inside it. I tried to bury myself in duty, orders, drills, patrols, anything to keep my hands busy, to keep my mind from fracturing. But it didn't work. Every order I carried out felt heavier. Every scream I heard over the comm gnawed deeper into my chest. One night, a young soldier cornered me in the barracks. His face was pale, his voice shaking. "Tell me," he whispered, "do you believe in this? Do you believe in him?" I stared at him. My jaw tight, my throat dry. Behind his eyes, I saw the boy on Arath Prime again, standing with glass in his hands. I wanted to tell him the truth, wanted to admit that doubt had eaten me alive. But the cameras watched. The commander's eyes were everywhere. "Yes," I lied. The boy's face crumpled. He turned away, his shoulders sagging. I don't know if he believed me. I don't know if I believed myself. The breaking point came weeks later, when the commander set his sights on the Lether system. It wasn't a military hub. It wasn't even council territory. It was neutral. Farm worlds, trade posts, families. Innocent. "Burn it," the commander ordered. "Let the galaxy see there are no safe harbors." For the first time, I couldn't move. My hands froze on the console, my chest tight. Around me, the bridge crew hesitated too, their eyes flicking toward me, toward each other. Doubt hung thick in the air. The commander noticed. His gaze fell on me like a hammer. "Execute the order," he growled. I looked at him. I looked at the men around me, and I knew that if I obeyed, I would be no different than the Dareth who burned Earth. My voice shook, but I forced it out. "No." The bridge went silent. The commander's face twisted, rage boiling in his eyes. "What did you say?" I stood, my fists clenched. "No more! Earth's gone! This isn't vengeance, it's madness! We're not saving humanity, we're burying it!" Gasps rippled through the crew. Some stared in horror, others in awe. The commander's hand went to his pistol, and in that moment I knew the mutiny had begun. The first shot wasn't his. It came from the far side of the bridge. One of the crew, young, scared, desperate, fired his rifle at the commander. The shot missed, sparking off steel. The commander roared, his pistol barking in return, the young man crumpling with a hole through his chest. Chaos erupted. Some men drew their weapons in defense of the commander, others in defiance. Gunfire tore across the bridge. Sparks and blood spraying against the walls. I dove for cover, my rifle hot in my hands, my heart pounding. This wasn't humanity versus the galaxy anymore. This was humanity versus itself. The mutiny spread like fire. Across the fleet, ships turned on each other, crews splitting into factions. Loyalists hunted rebels through steel corridors. Rebels sabotaged loyalist engines, blood staining every deck. Whole ships switched allegiance mid-battle, their guns turning against former allies. The void filled with fire again, but this time it wasn't alien fleets burning. It was us. On the Revenant, the fighting raged for hours. I led a squad of rebels through the lower decks, clearing rooms, securing armories. Every face I killed was human. Every scream was a brother's. My stomach twisted with every trigger pull, but I didn't stop. There was no stopping anymore. We fought not for vengeance, not for Earth, but for survival. By the time we reached the command deck, bodies lined the halls. Smoke choked the air. Blood slicked the steel. The commander still stood, defiant, pistol in hand, his eyes blazing with fire. "You think you can kill me?" he roared. "I am humanity. I am vengeance. Without me, you are nothing." I raised my rifle, my hands trembling. "Without you, maybe we have a chance." And I pulled the trigger. The shot echoed like thunder. The commander fell, his body crumpling to the steel. His blood pooled around him, thick and dark. For a moment, the ship was silent, utterly silent. Then a roar went up, not of victory but of exhaustion, of desperation, of men realizing they had crossed a line they could never return from. The commander was dead, but the fleet was shattered, and the galaxy was still coming. The commander's body lay cooling on the steel deck of the Revenant's bridge, but his shadow still choked the air. His blood seeped into the grated floor, thick and dark, pooling around our boots. The smell of burned ozone and iron filled my nose, a stench I knew I would never forget. No one spoke, not at first. The men who had fought for him stood frozen, their weapons still clutched in trembling hands. The men who had fought against him looked just as broken, eyes wide, chests heaving, as if none of us could believe what we had done. The commander had been more than a leader. He had been the embodiment of the oath, of vengeance itself. To kill him felt like killing the very fire that had carried us through 3,000 years. But fire has no mercy, and fire consumes everything, even its wielder. I lowered my rifle slowly, the heat of its barrel burning through my gloves. My hands shook, not from fear but from the crushing weight of what I had done. I had ended him. I had killed the man who had carried us this far, the man who had turned our whispers into thunder, our ghosts into demons feared across the stars. And yet, as I stared at his lifeless face, all I felt was emptiness. The silence broke when a voice rang out. "What now?" It came from one of the bridge officers, his face pale, his weapon still raised halfway. His words cracked like glass, fragile but sharp. "What happens now? He's dead. The fleet is tearing itself apart. The Council's armada is coming and we've just killed our commander. What the hell do we do?" The question cut through us like a blade. Men glanced at one another, eyes darting, fear rising in their throats. Some looked at me. Others looked at the loyalists who had lowered their guns in shock. No one had an answer. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "We survive," I said, though the words felt hollow. "We hold the fleet together, or we die." But holding the fleet together was like holding a dying animal. It thrashed, it bled, it bit at the hands trying to save it. Word of the commander's death spread through the Revenant first, then rippled across the fleet. Some cheered, seeing it as liberation. Others wept, calling it betrayal. Whole ships fractured down the middle, their crews splitting into loyalist and rebel factions. Gunfire echoed in the corridors of vessels across the armada, civil war erupting in steel and vacuum. We had bled in the Orion Belt. Now we were bleeding ourselves dry. On the Revenant, I was forced into command, not because I wanted it, but because no one else stepped forward. The men needed a face, a voice, someone to fill the void the commander had left. And so they looked to me, the man who had pulled the trigger, It didn't feel like leadership. It felt like a noose tightening around my neck. The first council of officers was chaos. We gathered in the strategy chamber, smoke still clinging to the steel walls, bloodstains not yet scrubbed from the floors. Half the chairs were empty, men dead, executed, or missing. The others filled with faces lined by exhaustion and suspicion. "We can't keep this up," one captain snarled, slamming his fist against the table. "We've burned too many worlds, made too many enemies. The Council's armada will crush us." "Then we fight," another shouted, his eyes blazing. The commander's vision was right. Vengeance is the only path. To turn back now is cowardice. "Cowardice," the first spat. "Tell that to the men dying for nothing." Voices rose, clashing like swords. Some demanded peace, surrender, survival at any cost. Others demanded we continue the fire, finish what we started, burn the galaxy until it bowed to us. I sat in silence, letting their fury wash over me. My head pounded, my chest tight. I wasn't the commander. I wasn't a man who could turn doubt into fire, fear into rage. I was just a soldier who had carried out orders until I couldn't anymore. Finally, I stood. The chamber went quiet. "We can't win against the galaxy," I said, my voice low but steady. "But we can't surrender either. They won't forgive us. They'll hunt us until every last one of us is ash. Our only chance is survival, splitting the fleet, scattering, making them bleed when they chase us. If we stay together, we die. If we scatter, maybe some of us live." The room erupted again. Half called it wisdom, half called it betrayal. But deep inside, we all knew it was truth. The split came fast. Within a week, ships were breaking away. Some swore loyalty to me, agreeing to scatter, to survive. Others clung to the commander's ghost, vowing to continue his war, to burn until the galaxy itself turned to ash. The fleet that had once been humanity's vengeance became a dozen splintered factions, each carving its own path through the stars. Brothers turned on brothers, former allies hunted each other like prey, the void filled with human blood, spilled not by aliens but by ourselves. We had sworn to avenge Earth. Now we were killing Earth's sons. The Council watched, and they smiled. Our collapse was their victory. They didn't need to destroy us anymore. We were doing it for them. Their armada held position, waiting, letting us bleed ourselves dry. They knew when the fires burned low, they could sweep in and finish what they had started 3,000 years ago. And still, we fought each other. I led my fragment of the fleet through dead systems, hiding in the shadows of black holes, scavenging fuel from wrecks. We were wolves without a pack, starving, hunted, desperate. Every day was survival, every night was haunted by ghosts. The men looked to me for strength, but I had none left. My orders were hollow, my words weak. I wasn't leading them, I was dragging them along a road that had no end. One night, in the quiet of my quarters, I stared at my reflection in the dark glass. My eyes were bloodshot, my face gaunt, my hands trembling. I saw my father in the lines of my face, heard his stories of Earth in the silence. He had spoken of skies and oceans, of laughter and warmth. He had told me to never forget what was lost. And I hadn't. But as I stared at myself, I wondered if I had twisted his words into something he would never have recognized. Would he have wanted this? Would he have wanted his son to be a butcher, leading men into slaughter, carving vengeance into the stars with no end in sight? I pressed my forehead against the glass and whispered the question into the void. The void gave no answer. The turning point came when the Council finally moved. Their armada swept into the Lether system, one of the places our splinter factions had chosen to regroup. Thousands of warships descended, crushing what remained of our brothers. The broadcasts of their slaughter spread across the galaxy. proof that humanity's fire was sputtering out. We intercepted the transmissions, watched the ships burn, heard the screams of men who had once fought beside us. Some cursed my name as they died, blaming me for the fracture. Others begged for mercy, their voices silenced by static. My men looked to me, their eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" they asked. I had no answer. That night, I walked the lower decks, listening to the whispers of my crew. Some still spoke of fighting, of striking back no matter the cost. Others spoke of fleeing, of finding a dead system to hide in until the council forgot us. The arguments echoed like the voices in my head. Fight, flee, burn, survive. And in the middle of it all, I felt nothing but exhaustion. 3,000 years of vengeance had brought us here, not to justice, not to Earth reborn, but to ashes. We had wanted to remind the galaxy of humanity's fire. And we had. They remembered. But what they remembered was not our strength, not our resilience, not our will to survive. They remembered our madness, and perhaps they were right. The next morning I stood before my men in the hangar bay. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow. Their bodies broken by years of war and weeks of betrayal. They looked at me not as a leader, not as a savior, but as a man who owed them truth. I took a breath, my voice rough, my chest heavy. We fought for Earth. We burned for Earth. But Earth is gone. And if we keep fighting like this, humanity will be gone too. Not by the Council's hands, but by our own. The hangar was silent. We have two choices. We scatter and survive, each of us carrying the memory of Earth into the void. Or we burn ourselves out here until there's nothing left but dust and ghosts. Their eyes stayed on me, searching, weighing. Some nodded slowly. Others clenched their fists, their anger sharp. But I knew then that it didn't matter what choice I made. The fleet was broken. Humanity was broken. And there was no going back. The stars were silent when the end began. We had been running for weeks, hunted across the void by council fleets. Our numbers had thinned to scraps, ships limping on half engines, hulls patched with whatever scrap we could weld in the dark. Men were starving, tired, broken. Some still clung to rage, their fists tight around their rifles. Others drifted through the corridors like ghosts, eyes hollow, their vengeance burned out long ago. And through it all, the whispers never stopped. Maybe we should surrender. They'll kill us if we do. At least it would be quick. At least it would end. I carried those whispers in my skull like nails. They drilled into me every hour, every sleepless night, until my bones ached from the weight of them. I had killed the commander to stop his madness, but I had no vision of my own. I wasn't a leader. I wasn't a savior. I was just a man dragging a dying fleet toward a horizon that didn't exist. And the horizon was closing fast. The council found us in the ruins of the Cinder system. It had once been a colony, human before the cleansing. Now it was nothing but rubble, burned worlds, shattered stations, skeletal rings orbiting a dead sun. We had chosen it as a hiding place, a graveyard where we thought no one would look. But the council looked. They always looked. Their armada fell on us like wolves. Thousands of ships, banners blazing, engines burning bright against the dark, dreadnoughts the size of mountains. Carriers vomiting endless swarms of fighters, cruisers lined up in flawless formation. We had barely 100 ships left. On the bridge of the Revenant, I watched their signatures light up the tactical display, a storm of red drowning out our flickering blue. My men stared with me, their faces pale, their jaws tight. They knew. I knew. This was the end. The comm crackled to life. A council admiral's voice filled the bridge, cold and sharp. Humans, Your fire is extinguished. Your vengeance is finished. Lay down your weapons, and we will grant you the mercy of a quick death. Mercy. That word twisted in my gut like a knife. 3,000 years ago, they had offered no mercy to Earth. They had burned oceans, split continents, turned our home into ash without hesitation. And now they dared to speak of mercy to us. I stepped forward, leaning over the comm. My voice was rough, low, steady. We are humanity. We do not lay down. If this is the end, then we burn with it. The Admiral's laughter echoed like steel grinding against bone. So be it. The battle began. Our ships surged forward, engines flaring, weapons screaming into the void. Railguns thundered, torpedoes streaked across the black, plasma beams lit the stars in burning arcs. We tore into their first line, shredding cruisers, detonating carriers. The void bloomed with fire, wreckage scattering like embers. But for every ship we destroyed, 10 more pressed in. Their formations tightened, their fire concentrated, their shields unbreakable walls. Our frigates disintegrated under their barrages. Our destroyers split in half, spilling men and flame into space. The void turned into a graveyard, each explosion another tombstone. On the Revenant, the deck shook with every impact. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Smoke choked the air. Alarms screamed in our ears. Men shouted orders, their voices drowned by the roar of weapons. I gripped the railing, my heart pounding, my throat raw. We were dying. But we weren't dying quietly. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time blurred in the chaos. The Council closed in, their dreadnoughts looming like mountains of steel. Our guns roared back, but our ammunition ran thin, our shields flickered, our engines screamed in protest. One by one, our ships winked out of existence, torn apart by the tide. Through the haze, I thought of Earth. I thought of my father's stories, of skies and oceans, of mountains and laughter. I thought of the boy on Arath Prime, standing with glass in his hands against the storm. I thought of Harlan, of Vero, of every man who had died not just to avenge Earth, but to carry its memory into the void. And I knew then that vengeance wasn't enough. It had never been enough. The Revenant's engines screamed as we turned headlong into the heart of the Armada. "Ramming course locked," the helmsman said, his voice steady despite the terror in his eyes. The men on the bridge looked at me. They didn't ask for orders. They didn't ask for survival. They just asked for meaning. I nodded. "Take us in." The Revenant roared forward, tearing through waves of fighters, smashing into cruisers, raking dreadnoughts with every gun we had left. Our black hole engine screamed at the edge of collapse, the core tearing itself apart as it pulled space into its jaws. The Council fired everything they had at us: beams, missiles, kinetic rounds. Every strike slammed into our hull, ripping steel apart, tearing decks open, venting men into the void. The ship groaned, dying, but still it drove forward. Still it fought. Still it burned. On the final approach, I closed my eyes. I didn't see the Council. I didn't see the fire. I saw Earth. I saw oceans stretching endless and blue. I saw skies painted gold with sunlight. I saw mountains rising into the clouds. I saw children laughing, running through green fields. I saw everything we had lost, everything we had carried for 3,000 years, and I whispered, not to the Council, not to my men, but to Earth itself. We didn't forget. The Revenant's core collapsed. The black hole engine detonated, tearing a hole in the void, ripping ships into its jaws. The Council's dreadnoughts buckled, their hulls shredded, their fleets dragged screaming into the dark. Fire consumed the system, the shockwave ripping across the stars. And then there was silence. No record survived of what happened next. Some say fragments of our fleet scattered into the void, carrying humanity's fire into exile once more. Others say we all died in the cinder system, erased as Earth had been erased. But the galaxy remembered. Whispers spread of humans who had stood against the Council's armada, of men who had turned vengeance into a weapon sharper than any blade.